cheating wife story. When her office party turned into a nightmare, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Simone, my wife of 5 years, was sitting without her shirt, draped over some guy in the hot tub below. The looks on their faces made it clear what was happening between them. Furious, I quickly filmed a short video on my phone. I thought about putting on my swim trunks and confronting them, but instead, I sat back in the room, trying to make sense of why she didn't want me at the party in the first place. She'd been working as a secretary at SG Funds, a hedge fund firm, for about a year now, and she always seemed happy. But now, I was starting to understand the real reason behind her constant good mood. Earlier that week, I had stumbled upon a message on her phone about a company Christmas party with a +1 invitation. When I asked her about it, she tried to talk me out of going, saying it would probably be boring for me with all the financial talk. Confused, I asked her if she was embarrassed to be seen with me, but she reassured me it wasn't that. She insisted it was just that the conversations at these events could get dull. For a while now, these monthly parties were for staff only, and Simone would come back late at night or sometimes even the next day. I had never questioned it before, but now I knew what really happened at those gatherings. When I responded with a casual agreement, she suggested that if I really wanted to come, I should make sure my tux was ready, but she hinted that I might not enjoy it. On the day of the party, she even recommended I bring swim trunks. I remember questioning how swim trunks were appropriate for a December Christmas party, but she explained that after the main event, they usually ended up at her boss's penthouse, which had a hot tub. She casually mentioned that this was a regular occurrence, and then asked me to promise to be on my best behavior. I assured her I would, but her tone didn't fill me with confidence. Out of curiosity, I asked why she was telling me this. Simone admitted that sometimes things got a bit wild at these parties, and she didn't want me to be upset if things seemed out of hand. She also noted that the men could get overly friendly. I brushed it off, saying as long as nothing crossed the line of what I'd call appropriate for a husband, there wouldn't be an issue. She smiled and kissed me on the cheek without answering. At the party, she introduced me to her friend Linda, calling me her husband. Linda gave me a sly smile and remarked that it was going to be a fun night, calling Simone wild and crazy. That comment raised a red flag for me, but Simone just laughed and walked off with Linda, leaving me to get drinks. After waiting for half an hour at an empty table, scanning the room for her, I realized I wasn't going to have any fun at this party. Frustration grew inside me as I felt increasingly invisible. 2 hours later, when I finally saw her again, she was surrounded by Linda and 3 guys, one of them with his arm around Simone's waist. Simone greeted me with a tipsy smile, kissed me with the taste of tequila on her lips, and casually mentioned they were heading to Ben's place, her boss, where the hot tub was waiting. I couldn't help but feel irritated when one of the guys grabbed her hand, pulling her away. I followed them to Ben's penthouse, but what I saw there shocked me. Simone was already in the hot tub with Ben and Dale, senior partners at her firm, acting as if they were just having fun. Linda approached me, asking if we could get together later, hinting that she thought we had an open marriage based on how Simone behaved with other men. Her words confused me, and when I asked what she meant, she revealed that Simone had been involved with Ben and Dale for quite some time. My stomach churned as I processed Linda's revelation. When I asked how long this had been going on, she confessed it had been happening since Simone started at the firm, over a year ago. I felt sick, realizing that Simone had been unfaithful for so long without me knowing. Linda, trying to comfort me, said Simone still loved me, but her words rang hollow. After hearing this, I couldn't stand it anymore. I went upstairs to change, but when I came down, there she was, still with those 2 guys in the hot tub. That's when I decided to confront her. I pulled Simone aside into a private room and demanded to know if she would ever have told me about this so-called open marriage. I showed her the video I had taken, exposing her betrayal. She tried to brush it off, claiming it was all just for fun, and that it didn't mean anything. But to me, it meant everything. I took off my wedding ring, placed it in her hand, and removed hers as well. When she asked what I was doing, I told her how disgusted I was by her actions and informed her that I would be filing for divorce on Monday. Ignoring her pleas and declarations of love, I remained cold, telling her not to come home. As I left, one of the men called after me, asking why I was leaving so soon and making a crude comment about Simone. Without looking back, I replied that she was all theirs now. I drove home, ignoring her attempts to call and text me. Once I arrived, I packed all her belongings into trash bags and loaded them into her car, parked outside. I changed the garage code so she couldn't get back in. By the time I was done, it was past 2:30 a.m., and I was exhausted. I collapsed into bed and fell asleep instantly. The next morning, the house phone woke me up. It was Simone, asking me to come and get her. I coldly told her she was no longer my problem and that any communication from now on would go through my lawyer. I mentioned that her car, along with her belongings, was waiting for her in the driveway, and then I hung up. When she tried calling again, I disconnected the house phone, determined never to see or hear from her again. I collapsed onto the bed and plugged the phone back in, not thinking much of it. By the time I woke up in the afternoon, I felt clear-headed enough to function. The first thing I noticed was that Simone's car was gone. Good. Maybe she finally got the message. I spent the next hour researching divorce lawyers online, diving into all the details about divorce laws in our state. Being a community property state, I was relieved that we didn't own any real estate, which meant fewer complications. Since we had no children, child support wouldn't be an issue either. Simone made as much, if not a little more, than I did, so I didn't expect any alimony to be a problem. I discovered that while most divorces in this state were no fault, there were options to file for infidelity or cruelty, which could make things messier and more expensive. But I didn't care about that. I just wanted it over. After making a few notes, I found the number for a lawyer named Jenny Hawkins. I decided I would give her a call first thing on Monday. As I was writing things down, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but thinking it could be related to Simone, I answered. A female voice introduced herself as Linda. She informed me that Simone was staying with her for a few days. I didn't react much, simply confirming that I was moving forward with the divorce. Linda, sounding worried, mentioned that Simone was a wreck, crying non-stop and teetering on the edge of a breakdown. I didn't let it affect me. Simone had done this to herself. Linda pushed further, asking if I still had any feelings for her. I responded coldly, admitting that my feelings now were pure hatred and disgust. I emphasized that Simone had not only cheated on me for over a year, but also humiliated me in public. To me, that was the end of the line. Linda tried to defend Simone, saying she loved me, but I wasn't having it. I asked bluntly if Simone had slept with Ben and Dale again after I left the party. Linda hesitated before admitting they had, suggesting that I could have enjoyed myself if I had stayed. I couldn't believe what I was hearing and told her goodbye before hanging up. Later, I noticed 2 text messages from unknown numbers that had come in early that morning. I opened them and saw videos attached. One message said, "Missed one hell of a party, bro." I played the first video and saw Simone in the hot tub, involved in intimate activities with 3 men. Ben and Dale were there, but the third man was someone I didn't recognize. He looked into the camera, grinning, and said, "That's quite a wife you've got there. Bro, too bad you weren't here." The second video showed more of the same, but this time it ended with Ben holding my wedding ring, which Simone handed to him with a smirk. I felt an overwhelming sense of rage as I transferred the videos to my computer, making a copy for the lawyer. For a brief moment, I considered sending them to Simone's friends and family, but I stopped myself. Jenny's website had warned against any rash actions that could backfire in court, so I decided to hold off for now. For the rest of the weekend, I didn't hear anything from Simone or Linda, and that was just fine with me. I spent my time purging Simone's presence from the apartment, getting rid of anything that reminded me of her. On Monday, I reached out to my boss, explained the situation, and took a short leave. He understood. He'd been through a similar experience with an unfaithful spouse himself and gave me his full support. That afternoon, I met with Jenny at her office. Before heading there, I went to the bank to make sure Simone couldn't access our joint account. I paid off her credit card and canceled it, then withdrew half the money and opened a new account in my name. During our meeting, Jenny walked me through the divorce laws and suggested we pursue an alienation of affection lawsuit against Simone's employer. Although the chances were uncertain, given the evidence I had, it was worth considering. I agreed to her handling the delivery of the legal papers, deciding they should be served at her office for maximum impact. After paying the retainer, I headed home. On the way, Linda called again. asking if I would meet with Simone that afternoon. I declined, following Jenny's advice to keep my distance. Linda insisted that Simone wanted to talk, but I gave her Jenny's contact info and ended the call, making it clear that any reconciliation was out of the question. After that, I stopped at a store to pick up a 12-pack of beer and a couple of packs of cigarettes. I hadn't smoked in years, not since Simone and I first got married, but tonight, I needed something to calm my nerves. Later, while sitting on my balcony, beer in hand, the house phone rang again. It was Ben Carlson, Simone's boss. His voice was different now, more formal, less carefree. He apologized for the events of Friday night, saying they had assumed I was okay with what was going on, as Simone had told them we had an open marriage. I wasn't having any of it. I asked why he hadn't bothered to confirm that with me, especially when he knew we were married. He admitted it was a mistake, but claimed they never intended to ruin my marriage, that it was all just in good fun. I laid out my terms. I told him he'd better be ready to testify against Simone in court, and that I was planning to sue him for alienation of affection. If he wanted to make things right, he could comply with my demands without any argument. He tried to protest, asking if I was serious about suing them. I made it clear I was, emphasizing that they had violated their own moral clauses, destroying my marriage in the process. Ben started backpedaling, saying it wasn't meant to go this far, and that they didn't expect me to react this way. I ended the call, grabbed another beer, and went back out onto the balcony to smoke. For the next few days, things were quiet. I didn't hear from Simone, Linda, or anyone else until Wednesday. That's when they were served with the divorce papers at Simone's office. Later, Linda called, furious that I hadn't given Simone a chance to explain herself. I couldn't care less. Simone had her chance, and she blew it. I told Linda not to call me again and slammed the phone down. That night, Ben called again, but this time he was furious. He threatened me, saying he'd make my life miserable for filing the lawsuit. I called Jenny immediately to let her know about the threat. Good, she said. I'll file for a restraining order against him and Simone. She warned me to keep my cool, not to do anything rash, and assured me that the restraining order would be delivered soon. That afternoon, a courier dropped off a copy of the restraining order, and I decided to take extra precautions. I bought a motion-activated camera to cover the front of my apartment and kept a baseball bat by the door, just in case. For the rest of the week, things stayed relatively calm. But on Saturday night, everything changed. I was on the balcony, nursing a beer and cigarette, when the doorbell rang. Pounding on the door followed. I put out my cigarette, went to the front room, and looked through the peephole. Sure enough, it was Ben, and someone else was with him. He continued banging on the door, yelling for me to open up, claiming I was violating some restraining order. I calmly told him through the door that I was calling the police, but he just kept shouting. I continued dialing emergency services, explaining the situation at my door. The operator reassured me that several calls had already been made from my area, and police cruisers were en route. She advised me not to open the door until the officers arrived, and I thanked her before hanging up. Ben's relentless pounding made me wonder if he was actually trying to break down the door. Gripping the bat tighter, I waited. Soon, I heard a commotion outside and peeked through the peephole. 2 large police officers were arresting Ben and the man with him, putting them both in handcuffs. One of the officers knocked on my door, identifying himself as law enforcement. When I opened the door, Ben shot me a furious look as they led him toward the cruiser, spewing threats. The officer asked if I knew him, and I nodded, showing him my restraining order. He reviewed it, radioed his partner, and informed me that they'd be taking Ben and his friend downtown for the night. I briefly explained my side of the story, and the officer thanked me for cooperating, reassuring me that Ben wouldn't be bothering me for a while. After closing and locking the door, I returned to the balcony with a fresh beer, feeling a small sense of relief. The next day, news of Ben's arrest hit the papers, with a headline that read, "Hedge Fund CEO Arrested." Over the following days, more articles popped up, detailing how SG Funds was losing clients due to its involvement in the scandal, ultimately affecting their financial standing. I couldn't help but think, serves them right. By Monday, I was back at work, trying to focus despite everything swirling around me. It wasn't easy, but I managed to get through the day. Nearly 3 weeks passed without a word from Simone or Linda, and I started to think I might finally get some peace. That was until I received a call from Jenny, my lawyer. After some brief pleasantries, she told me Simone had hired her own attorney and that they were petitioning the court for mandatory marriage counseling. I was livid. I asked Jenny if the court could really order counseling, and she confirmed that they could. She advised me to attend, warning that refusing could result in being held in contempt of court, potentially landing me in jail. I made it clear that reconciliation wasn't an option for me, and Jenny sympathized, but she urged me to go through the motions. Begrudgingly, I agreed. Jenny then dropped another bombshell. Simone's attorney had revealed that Simone was pregnant. Frustrated, I asked how long I would have to wait before we could proceed with the divorce. Jenny explained that if the child was mine, it could delay things for up to 9 months, and I would likely be required to pay child support. However, the judge did approve a legal separation in the meantime. I couldn't believe it. 9 months of this? I sarcastically thanked Jenny, who gave me the details for the counselor's office, and I put the appointment on my calendar. I arrived at the counselor's office with a clear plan. Make it known that reconciliation was off the table. When I was ushered in, I found Simone already seated on a love seat, looking downcast. The counselor, Dr. Abigail Farnsworth, introduced herself and suggested I sit next to Simone, but I chose a small wooden chair off to the side. I made it clear that I didn't want to be there, but Dr. Farnsworth acknowledged my reluctance and thanked me for attending anyway. She turned to Simone, asking her what she hoped to get out of the sessions. Simone, with tears in her eyes, expressed a desire to reunite, especially with a baby on the way, wanting us to be a family again. I couldn't hide my scoff, and Dr. Farnsworth shifted her focus to me, asking about my goals. I stated plainly that reconciliation wasn't possible. I watched as Simone flinched at my words. Dr. Farnsworth, still maintaining her professional calm, asked if I would consider reconciling for the sake of the child. I reiterated my doubt about being the father, but I assured her that if the child was mine, I would fulfill my responsibilities, just not with Simone by my side. The counselor then asked again about considering reconciliation for the child's benefit, and that's when I decided to show her the videos. I pulled out my phone and showed her the clips I'd received, hoping it would help her understand the depth of my betrayal. Her face turned sour as she watched, clearly disgusted. After putting my phone away, I asked how she would feel if she were in my shoes, if her husband had done this to her. I pointed out that Simone had cheated on me for over a year, and even had the audacity to do it in front of me. Dr. Farnsworth acknowledged my point, but urged me to focus on the child and the situation at hand. I told her Simone owed me answers. Dr. Farnsworth agreed, and Simone finally lifted her head, her face flushed with embarrassment. I asked Simone if she knew what was going to happen the night of the party. She nodded, admitting she had planned for it. I pressed further, asking if that was the real reason she didn't want me there. Again, she confirmed it. I accused her of intentionally trying to humiliate me, and though she hesitated, she admitted that was true. I questioned how long her affairs with the men at SG had been going on, and she confessed it had started when she first joined the company. When I asked why, her answer was casual and infuriating. She said it was fun, exciting, and made her feel attractive. Then I asked how many men she had been with, excluding me. Her response was nonchalant, 4 or 5 dozen. My jaw dropped. I was utterly shocked by the scale of her infidelity, and I couldn't help but question the risk of diseases she might have exposed me to. With mounting rage, I demanded to know if she even knew who the father of her child was, and she admitted she didn't. I felt disgusted that she expected me to raise a child she wasn't even sure was mine. My love for her had long vanished, replaced by a burning resentment. The counselor, sensing that I had pushed far enough, signaled for me to stop. She noted that I had made my feelings clear, and I agreed, stating that I wasn't throwing away 5 good years of marriage because the last year had been a lie. After concluding the session, we scheduled individual appointments for the next week. As I left, Simone called out to me in the parking lot, but I ignored her and drove off, watching in the rearview mirror as she broke down sobbing in her car. The sight gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. At least she was feeling a fraction of the pain she had caused me. Later that night, Linda called, furious. She blamed me for Simone's condition, telling me Simone had been rushed to the hospital due to a complication. Linda accused me of being heartless, but I defended myself, saying all I did was speak the truth. Linda demanded I at least provide my insurance information since Simone was still legally my wife, reminding me that I was responsible for the hospital bills. After considering it, I decided to go to the hospital. Upon arrival, I gave the nurse my insurance information and spoke briefly with the doctor about Simone's condition. He explained that complications in pregnancies were sometimes difficult to pinpoint, but assured me that Simone would be okay. When I asked how far along she was, he estimated she was around 9 or 10 weeks pregnant. There was a possibility the child could be mine, but I wasn't convinced it mattered. Steeling myself, I entered Simone's room. She lay in bed, her eyes filled with tears. Linda stood at the foot of the bed, clearly displeased. I shot her a sharp glare, which sent her retreating from the room without another word. Turning back to Simone, I made it clear that our relationship was truly over. She asked me if I hated her as much as I had said earlier, and I admitted that the intensity of my anger had faded somewhat. However, I was firm in my stance that there was no chance for reconciliation. The damage had been done, and the trust was shattered beyond repair. Frustration welled up in me as I explained how each time she went to the store, I was left wondering if she was fooling around with someone, even the checkout clerks. I questioned how things had taken such a sharp turn, especially after all the years I had treated her with nothing but love and respect. Simone denied that I had done anything wrong and acknowledged that I had been a devoted husband. But that didn't matter now. I told her that if she really felt that way, she wouldn't have given in to the advances of other men. She admitted that others had influenced her, telling her that it was normal for husbands to see their wives with other men. I couldn't believe she bought into such nonsense. Dismissing her excuses, I reiterated that the divorce was happening, and there was no salvaging what we had. Simone, tearfully accepting my decision, promised to inform her lawyer the next day. I made it clear that any hope for friendship was unrealistic. Apologies or not, my mind was made up. I looked at her one last time. "Yeah," I said, stepping toward the door. "Goodbye, Simone." I could hear her sobbing as I left the room, but I didn't care. As I walked away, I thought to myself, good riddance. A few days later, Jenny called me with news. As promised, Simone had dropped all objections to the divorce. Abigail had written a report, stating that reconciliation was impossible and recommending anger management for me. The judge agreed but stopped short of making it a requirement. Jenny also secured settlements from SG Funds, Ben, and Dale. About a month later, she handed me the largest check I'd ever seen in my life. "Minus my fee, of course," she said with a wink. I just smiled and deposited the check, ready to move on with my life. As time passed, SG Funds, or as I like to call it, Sodom and Gomorrah, closed its doors about 6 months later. Clients had lost trust in the company's integrity, and I couldn't help but cynically wonder why. Ben and Dale stayed out of my life after their short jail stint. They seemed content with fading into obscurity, starting over on the West Coast after their reputations were thoroughly tarnished. Simone and Linda continued to live together, finding work at a strip mall in a women's clothing and cosmetics store. Occasionally, I'd spot them in public, but I never acknowledged their presence. My life carried on, and though I remained single for a while, I eventually began dating again, though cautiously. A couple of years later, I met Claire Hansen, a woman who had also gone through the pain of infidelity in her previous marriage. We took things slow, bonding over shared experiences and gradually building trust. Our early dates were simple: dinners, movies, long walks in the park. Claire was vulnerable, and I wanted to respect that, so I was careful, offering her support and taking the lead only when she felt comfortable. I found her attractive, but I didn't push for more. I let her set the pace. One evening, after a lovely dinner at her condo, Claire studied me with an intrigued expression. "Do you even find me attractive?" she asked with a playful tone, curiosity gleaming in her eyes. I smiled, reassuring her that my attraction went far beyond the physical. Amused by my laid-back approach, she teasingly asked if I even liked girls. I laughed softly, assuring her that I did, more than she knew. Our connection was growing stronger, and I felt hopeful about where it could lead.